Thanks, Chad. All right. So yes, this slide here, now the next section here, we're going to focus on some of the use cases that we have done. So particularly, we have done two use cases to compare the performance of Enervenue's nickel hydrogen system with lithium LFP providers. So we have first use case, which is the high cycle count. So like Chad was talking about, we are looking at multiple cycles here per day, and then we are adopting an overbuild strategy for both. So both Enervenue and lithium is going to be an overbuild. So you're going to be overbuilding for the whole project life. And these are deep discharge cycles. Use case 2 is relatively less amount of cycling. So we have around 1.75 cycles. And then you have augmentation for lithium system, but Enervenue is still overbuilt because you don't really need to do any augmentation for Enervenue. So the things to note before we go into the results about the assumption of the study. So both the Enervenue and the lithium models that we used are fully validated with OEM data. So we are using models that are built in the Storlytics platform, and these models have been validated with OEM data. So the characteristics of these models are the models captures capacity degradation accurately. It captures self-discharge, runtime efficiency, and the temperature impact. Something to note that the balance of plant cost and the EPC or any kind of engineering cost is not included. So the numbers that we'll be showing is basically the cost of the DC block, your PCS, and then your energy loss cost, energy cost, and then cost for maintaining your performance guarantees. For lithium augmentation, we have used the market data from August 2022 for some of the forecasted price that we have used in the augmentation of lithium prices. And then we are not considering the auxiliary loads as part of this study, specifically because the model that we developed for this one, for Enervenue, was specifically at 20C temperature. And that's because of the data that was available in the time of model creation. But then we didn't want to penalize the lithium system adversely because we know if the temperature varies, there is going to be impact on the auxiliary consumption of the lithium system. So to make it an apple-to-apple comparison, we did take out the auxiliary loads. So all the results that you see here, along with the white paper, the simulation files are located in this link here, download simulation files. So if you have a specific use case in mind that you want to see what the outcome are going to be or compare what the technologies, you can actually go and download it. And you have to download the Storlytics software, and then you can run your specific use cases yourself. With that background, this is just an example for you to show how this model looks like in the Storlytics platform and some part of the validation results. So we have like a separate file structure for the models, battery models, and then you have different tabs. You have general tabs, you have cell information. Some of the numbers are not basically stacked out because you get that with the licensed version of Storlytics. But these are some of the parameters we have, and then we have degradation specific parameters as well, part of the model. Here you can see that a small portion of the validation on the model and the test data. So really showing that on the SOC range, our error percentage is between 1 and minus 1.5, so 1% error. And the power side as well, the differences between the test data and model data is minimal, so which kind of gives us confidence on the model. And the similar approach is taken for all the lithium LFP models that has been used as well. So now getting into the case studies themselves. So like we talked about, so we are taking a 25 megawatt 4-hour system. The project life is for 20 years. The requirement is that you got to maintain 100 megawatt hour throughout the project life. And the use case here is this one, right? So you have multiple cycles happening. So you have charge happening at the night time, in the morning hours, you are doing discharge. And then again, maybe during a high solar penetration, you're doing some solar charge and then discharging again. And then the later part of the day, you can participate in some of the market signal, like ancillary markets as well. In this case, this is a PJM example for the frequency signal for this portion. So the idea there is to if you have multiple cycles happening, what is the impact is going to be and how these two technologies is going to compare. On the right-hand side, you can see our scorecard. So basically, in summary, what you can see is that the Enervenue system is excelling in terms of degradation performance. So they have better install light capacity as well as average degradation rate, and also the usable depth of discharge. So on a system level, you can achieve more. You can go from 0 to 100% compared to lithium system, which are limited on a system level. And then on the self-discharge and the cycle RTA, which is the round trip efficiency, the lithium system performs better than the Enervenue system. So now the question is, okay, so we understand the technical differences. So what is the impact of this on the overall financial of the project? So that we address on the next slide after this one. So this slide is just a snapshot of it showing how we're modeling this in the Storlytics platform. There are several tabs here. I mean, you can choose the battery model, you can choose the inverter model, you can input the use case profile that you want to simulate, and then you choose the configuration of the system, and then you run your simulation. On the left was the Enervenue system, on the right is the lithium system. So with that, so now comes some of the driving factors behind the differences that we saw. So one of the things is the degradation performance. So like you can see, in this particular case, lithium system degradation was way more degradation per year was happening compared to the lithium, which showed very minimal degradation over the project life. So what is the outcome of that, right? So the outcome of that is for a 100 megawatt hour project, 2.1 cycles daily, we needed about 112 megawatt hour at beginning for Enervenue system at year 0. But for lithium, we needed around 219 or 220 megawatt hour. So that's kind of the scale in difference we're talking about. So if your installed capacity required is a lot more, that basically ends up impacting your overall project cost as well. So in this particular case, we looked at the overall capex cost for the DC block. Enervenue was around 39 million, and which is significantly less than what lithium would cost, around 62 million. Other impact is that the Enervenue system did have a lower round trip efficiency, around 90% compared to 97% for the lithium. And this is, we're talking about DC to DC RT here. And for a C/4 case. So another aspect is to quantify this impact or this difference in round trip efficiency, which is captured in the energy loss. So as we know, battery system, they don't generate their own energy. They store energy, and in the process, there is some losses. So that losses needs to be accounted for the overall cost of the project. So we saw that for the Enervenue one, the cost was around 14.7, which was more than 3.43 million for lithium. But so in one aspect, Enervenue was more costly in terms of round trip efficiency and losses, but then in terms of degradation, it was much more cheaper. But overall, what we saw for this particular use case is that Enervenue's one was the most cost effective and the better option. So you can see the breakdown here, and I'm going to go a little bit more detail on this slide. So really this slide gives the breakdown of the numbers. So, but something to note here, as you can see that for lithium system, the yellow one, which is the energy loss, was not as much impactful. It was a small portion of the overall cost. Most of the cost was done or incurred by the cost of the lithium batteries themselves. But for the Enervenue system, the overall DC block cost was less, but they have a significant portion of the cost was because of the energy loss and the low round trip, relatively low round trip efficiency. So on this one here, this just highlights some of the numbers. So as we already talked about the DC block cost, you could see the difference, and then you can see the difference on the energy cost. We actually converted that into net present value, and you can see that the cost differential there. And overall, it brought us down to what we term the metrics that we like to use typically is the effective cost per required end-of-life energy. So in this case, the end-of-life required was 100 megawatt hour, and that needs to be maintained throughout the project life. So for that, we saw that Enervenue's dollar per kWh effective cost was much less than lithium system. Okay, so that covers our first case study. So on the second case study, we wanted to do something a little bit different because we're seeing a lot of market discussion going on around augmentation for lithium system. So this is the project requirement is almost similar. We have 25 megawatt for our project, 100 megawatt hour. The cycle count is a little less compared to the last case. And also for the lithium ion system, we are using an augmentation approach. So the profile here itself is almost similar, but they don't have any ancillary or market participation. So you are charging at the beginning of the day, then discharging during the morning hours. During the day when the solar is high, you are charging from the solar and then discharging at the evening hour. So in this particular case as well, we saw a similar trend in the technical differences. So degradation was better. That led to better initial capacity and degradation rate. Losses and self-discharge was more, which led to more self-discharge. The self-discharge now scored for Enervenue to be lower than the lithium system. The numbers are different, but the generic trend that we saw for this particular case is similar as well. So in this walks, you can look a little bit deep into the overall augmentation that happened for the lithium. For the Enervenue, it was overbuilt. So the same overbuilt around on 12 and 13 megawatt hour was needed for the whole 20 years. So that's like 10% overbuilt. But compare in this particular case, we were doing 3 augmentation cycles. So we started with 127.5 megawatt hour. So around 25% overbuilt for lithium. Around year 5, we needed to add some more capacity to maintain more than 100 megawatt hour. So we did around 30 megawatt hour of augmentation at phase 2. Then around year 12, we did a replenishment cycle. Now that varies. Typically, we do anywhere between 12 to 20. You will do you want to do a replenishment cycle for the lithium system. So in this particular case, we are using at year 12, we did the replenishment. So replenishment basically means you take augmentation means you have your old cells, you go ahead and add some more cells in terms of capacity. But replenishment means that you basically replace your old cells as well. There are quite a few different strategies of doing augmentation. You have your AC augmentation, you have your DC augmentation, you can have DC to DC converters. In this particular case, we are just assuming DC augmentation. There was no cost included for DC to DC converters. So just to make it clear, we didn't account for any DC to DC converter cost. So one the things to note here is that the Enervenue system did not require any augmentations compared to lithium needed multiple cycles of augmentation. We see impact of that on the overall cost. So the overall cost was around 39 million for Enervenue, but then lithium, there was an initial capex cost, but then there was an augmentation cost as well. So all this together was coming out to be more than what Enervenue had. Similar, I would say, conclusion on the round trip efficiency, like the first case. So we have almost similar results here. But of course, this one is still a little bit less round trip efficiency because we're not cycling as much here, like the previous case. Yeah, so on this particular case as well, what we saw for this particular use case and the augmentation approach that we have taken on this use case, the numbers were working in favor of Enervenue overall. So it meets your project requirements as well as overall it's more cost effective for this kind of application. Now you might have a little different sets of assumptions on your augmentation approach, your replenishment cycle. So I would suggest you all, to download the project files and put in your assumptions so that you can see the cases that best suits your needs and your sets of requirements. Same here. The one thing I'll just focus is that, yes, the augmentation cost was around 30 million for lithium system, which was not there for Enervenue. So you could see that reflected here, that there's a big portion of the overall DC block cost is going into the augmentation. But in terms of the generic conclusion, we saw the similar trend, except like we see for the discussion. So something we'd like to share with the project designers, the things that you need to consider as you are doing. There's a lot of traction going on in the energy storage industry, a lot of projects coming online, a lot of manufacturing being brought up in the US as well. So it's certain things, it's important for you to look into the modeling aspect and the sizing that basically can help you to optimize your project and help you design the winning project. So really you got to do your use case specific data simulation if you want to get an edge over others. Generic market assumptions or degradation curves are good, but those are just good for very high level estimates. But for if you want to find the right technology and then you want to find the right overview factor augmentation, you need to do is specific data simulation. You have to make sure your energy storage model that you are using are able to capture following factors very accurately, like capacity degradation. So there are several things that can impact your degradation. Now those varies from technology to technology. But for lithium, like your C rate, depth of discharge, temperature, those plays a very vital role. There are some other technologies which these factors might not be that impactful. But you need to have a very accurate model of degradation that can reflect all these different factors and their interplay. Self-discharge need to be modeled correctly. You need to have your internal storage, like your RTE losses. And that varies over time, varies over your SOC range. You need to be able to capture that. Your auxiliary load assumptions. So you have your C, it varies with your C rates, your temperature, your container design, liquid cooling versus air cooling. So all these factors plays into your auxiliary load assumptions as well. So you need to have accurate, validated model for this to come up with good design assumption. Your inverter models needs to represent, temperature derating, DC voltage derating, compatibility with battery racks, right? So you need to, when you're doing the simulation, you need to put together a system that is actually viable. So you need to look into those as well. And most important of all this modeling that you're doing, comparing different technology, those needs to be happening in a common simulation platform for an apple-to-apple comparison. Otherwise, there are just so many differences, and those are difficult to capture, if you do not have validated model in a common platform. And other important factor is also you need to simulate your beginning of life and your end of life. So when you're designing project, you need to make sure it's going to be able to meet the requirement at the beginning of the project as well as at year 20. So you need to do yearly, like all the year simulation to really get great confidence on your design. So with that, I think that will be all. So I think we can take some questions.
Hi, yes, thank you. We have now entered the Q&A portion of the webinar. So please remember you can submit questions in the Q&A box on your screen. We have a lot of really great questions come through. I'm going to ask some early ones, I think, that are more geared toward Enervenue. So Chad, maybe you can answer some of these first ones. The first one is, if the Enervenue vessels are pressurized, how do they not have more of a fire risk?
Good question. So a couple different facets there. Number one, it is a low pressure. So if we think of like a scuba tank, right, at 3,000 or 4,000 PSI, if we think at other hydrogen storage tanks are higher than that, fuel cells, are higher than that. We're at an order of magnitude less from all of those. So we're a few hundred PSI. So that really reduces that risk. The other aspect of that is, we're a unique battery chemistry, right? So not only do we need to be looking at standards for batteries, but also standards for pressure vessels. And so that falls into, there's hydrogen involved. So it falls into NFPA 855, for example. Our VP of product engineering is part of the 855 committee, right? So we have a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise there in the way we're designing our batteries to make sure that there is no risk.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, this next question will be for you too, Chad. What are the main contributors to the lower DC-DC RTE of the Enervenue system?
Yeah, good question. So Jamil actually hinted at it that our energy storage vessels are just a tad over 90% DC to DC round trip efficient. So that compared with a lithium battery, just from a pure chemistry and chemical reaction standpoint, we're just not to that same 95 to 97% that you see with lithium, but also far better than what you see with some of the other non-lithium chemistries, which many times are in the kind of 60 to 70% range.
Okay. Yeah, maybe this one could be more for Jamil. Does the Storlytics software account for variance in self-discharge over the state of charge range? If so, what other factors are taken into account within the simulation?
Yeah, it does. Great question. So as we know, the self-discharge is a function of state of charge. So the higher the state of charge, the more the self-discharge is. As you go below, as the state of charge goes down, the self-discharge rate decreases. But it also is a function of the temperature. So our platform takes both the state of charge and the temperature into account for the self-discharge model. Great question.
Okay. Next question is asking, what are the most impactful types of cycles for lithium? And does Storlytics software account for different cycle types?
Yeah. So for some of the characteristics of lithium is that if you have very high depth of discharge, so going from 0 to 100%, that kind of cycles has a much more effect on degradation that is detrimental to the degradation. You also have to look at your average resting state of charge. So where your state of charge is, typically the higher it is, the more impactful it is on degradation. So our platform takes those. So the way our platform works, it looks into the profile that you input, and it basically characterizes that profile based on these factors that impacts the degradation of the battery. So it characterizes your profile based on depth of discharge, your maximum C rate, your real-time C rate. It looks into your average state of charge, looks into temperature. So all these factors are blended into the degradation model that we use.
Okay. Someone is wondering why the AC system cost is higher with lithium.
Yeah, so great question. So one of the limitations that we applied here is how much megawatt hour you can connect behind one inverter. In this particular case, we applied around 21 racks that you can maximum connect behind one of the inverters. And that's mainly because of the DC short circuit limitation on the inverter side. So that you cannot connect an amount of energy behind one inverter. So once you apply that, and then you look at amount of megawatt hour you need to connect, that basically drives the number of inverters needed. So it's not basically driven more by the MVA rating. It's driven more by how much megawatt hour we need for lithium, and to connect them, we needed more number of inverters, and that causes the AC cost to be more.
Okay. This next question, I'm thinking it's maybe directed more toward the Enervenue product specifically, but is it possible to extend the duration beyond 4 hours? Could it go to a 10 to 12 hour product?
Yeah, great question. And absolutely. So really a peak duration of 2 hours all the way out to 10 or 12 hours. So it offers that flexibility where you can adapt to maybe changing use cases, or even, the use case within the first 5 years of a project may be different than the last 5 years of the project. And so that really allows you to have that flexibility to go all the way out into the long duration spectrum of 10 to 12 hours.
Okay. Someone's wondering, does the Enervenue system require voltage monitoring at the vessel level or only at the string level?
Yeah, so that's getting into our BMS. And so our BMS is custom in-house designed, and, because it is a different technology, there are different things that we are measuring. And so voltage is one, pressure is another, and current. So really those three give an extremely accurate depiction of the state of charge of each energy storage vessel. So we do monitor that on each ESV or energy storage vessel, and not necessarily at the string level. So we want to see as much data in detail as we can.
Okay. Can the ESVs, can they be adapted and implemented worldwide?
Absolutely. So we have a really aggressive global scale-up strategy, and part of that includes really close collaboration with our strategic partners. So Europe, Middle East, Africa, Australia, India, China, all of those regions we are actively working in. And again, that's through our strategic partnerships. So the scale up in those regions is really kind of matching or pretty close to parallel with our scale up here in the US.
Okay, this next question, bear with me. It's a lot of acronyms and everything, but can you describe more the meaning of the cost of energy loss and the total running cost line items and the comparison of the ESV versus lithium?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a Jamil question. But maybe Jamil, before you answer that, a lot of these questions, right, that are really diving into the great work that Jamil and his team have done, you can find these white papers, the graphics that he shared in the detail. You can find those white papers on the Enervenue website, on the resources page, and feel free to dive in and digest those. You can also find those through Storlytics resources as well. Sorry, go ahead, Jamil.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I'm gonna start with the same. But yeah, just quickly, so the total running cost has two components. One is to maintain the state of health guarantee. So maintaining 100 megawatt hour plus throughout the project life, maintaining that guarantee has a cost. So part of the total running cost is that. And the other part is the energy loss cost. So basically the energy loss cost basically means that you charge the system with a certain amount of energy and then you discharge. Of course, because of the losses, you do not get the same amount of energy out. So that difference between the charge energy and the discharge energy is accounted over the project life, and then basically is the energy loss cost.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so there's a lot of questions in here, and a lot of them are very specific. So I think we're going to wrap up the live questions right now, but please feel free to reach out to our presenters. And I know they're going to get a list of the questions after this webinar, so they will reach out to answer your questions more directly. But yeah, this webinar will be shared with all registrants, so you can view it again at your convenience if you want to go over some more of the data. So I would like to thank our speakers for being here and Enervenue for sponsoring today's webinar. So thank you to everyone for joining us today, and hope to see you at more Solar Power World webinars in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Excellent.